Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, this July 19th meeting at 4:30. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence.
We had 6 firefighters and 15 police officers lost to the line of duty since our last meeting.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Okay, to get this month's session underway, the next item on the agenda is our going into executive session. Possible vote to go into executive session on personal matters referencing the fire chief self-evaluation pursuant to ARS 38-431-03A1 and legal advice pursuant to ARS 38-431-03A3 regarding the same. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. I got it. Thank you, Gene. Any opposed? Okay, motion moves. We are now in executive session.
Thank you.
Okay, so right now we show Al being absent. Okay. Okay, we will reconvene in an open session. Is your mic's on?
No, did you star 6 at a?
Oh, I don't know if
I
it's,
did.
yeah.
Maxwell says we're up.
So back in public session, as a result of the executive session, the board was able to review and discuss with the chief. I'd like to set a date in which we return our comments back to staff for inclusion into the evaluation. And I'm looking at a 2-week window, which would be, I believe, August the 2nd.
Correct.
That's correct, okay. So let's make a motion that August the 2nd is the date in which we return our comments to staff for inclusion into the, to make a complete evaluation document.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
no item on the agenda for that motion. You can question about when you want it.
okay, thank you. So with that said, then direction to the board is just that we will respond back to staff August the 2nd by the end of the workday so that we can put together the complete document and have it reviewed at the August meeting. Okay? I think that's good enough time for that, Chief, 2 weeks.
Mr. Chair, yeah, and then it will give the staff about a week, then we'll be able to load it in the packet as normal practice.
And I would only ask that the board not wait till the 11th hour, that we get it on board as quick as we can to give staff enough time to, so that they're not rushed. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is obviously to reconvene into the regular business meeting, and the first item is the public forum. Chief, do we have any members from the community wishing to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda for discussion and possible action, and it would consist of the June 21st, 2022 regular meeting minutes and the July 6th, 2022 special meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
And the financial report,
Pardon me?
and the financial reports. That's not part of the consent agenda.
That is not part of the consent agenda. Although I have seen that, it is not part of this one. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. The next item on the agenda is the financial report and updates. The Director of Finance, Gabe Boldra. Chief, do you know who's running it?
Hello, Board Chair. members of the board. I'm filling in for Gabe. This is Dominic Filosa with the James Vincent Group. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
And welcome.
perfect. Welcome. Thank you so much. Heidi, do you want me to present my slides, or do you want to just keep it here?
Have it here, so I'll just try to keep up with you.
Okay, perfect. Well, great. Nice to we'll be with you online. I am here to present the financial results for the June 2022. You should have the financial packet in your hands, and I will just go over the slideshow. So starting off with the results for the month of June, we had total revenue of $723,936, which resulted in an over budget of $109,368. And really the primary driver of that over budget was the non-tax revenue. And we received, the district received monies of $101,497 from the Prop 207. Going on to the total expenses for the month, which were $1,770,214, which was over budget by $122,014. The primary driver there was personnel expenses, which were over budget by $108,673. And really what that related to was the timing of when we had budgeted the payroll expenses compared to when the actuals happened. And as you'll see in the next slide, we'll talk about the overall trend was that personnel expenses were actually under budget for the entire year. If we want to move on to the next slide. Going on for this slide, we're going to look at the year-to-date perspective. So year-to-date revenue from July through June for the entire fiscal year was $20,667,702, which was over budget by about $925,000. The primary driver here was the non-tax revenue, and some of the big items were ambulance revenue being over budget by approximately $569,000, and then the miscellaneous revenue being over budget by $179,000, with the primary driver being the Prop 207 monies. I would like to point out that tax revenue was under budget for the entire year by about $59,000. Again, that's probably some delinquency there, but if you look at what the district had budgeted for the year and what has been collected so far, it's about 99%. And so we expect that some of that will be collected, but based on the past years, about 99% collection is where the district has historically been. Looking at the expenses from year to date, the expenses were $17,158,938, which was under budget by $954,180. Again, as I alluded to earlier, the primary driver of that, I guess, surplus or under budget was personnel expenses, which were under budget by $765,095. Want to move on to the next slide. On this slide, we're showing the amount of expenses that have actually been incurred to what has been budgeted. And again, as you see, there was from what had been budgeted by the district for the entire year, it came in well below than what had been budgeted for the year. If we want to go to the next slide. Following on, this is in the pie chart, we have actual expenses year to date that have been incurred and broken out by categories: personnel, operations, communication, managerial. And at the bottom left, you'll see averages of what typically occurs. These, as you'll see, personnel expenses is a bit higher than what has been in the industry average. But again, this is trending all year. And so, yeah, if we want to finish up to the next slide. And then finally, for our presentation, we do want to show you the cash and assets and liabilities position as of 6/30/2022 compared to 6/30/2021. You will see that cash grew about $815,000, as well as other assets and liabilities did decrease a bit, but stayed relatively the same. That concludes my presentation. I will stand for any questions that the board may have.
Do we have any questions for, for Dominic? You know, the question I have is we're at that time of our budget, the very beginning, that we look at the carryover from the previous budget. And is there enough carryover to allow us to move forward before that first warrant from the county comes our way?
So thank you for that question. I assist the district every single 2 weeks when payrolls are processed and AP is done. And I can tell you that the district is in a strong financial position in terms of the amount of money that is left over in the county account, that it will, that we have no anticipation that there will be any struggle to cover those expenses until the first deposit happens into the county account.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you for your report. I move to go ahead and approve the June 2022 finance report as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, financial report for June 2022 is approved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is our fire chief report. Chief Trutland.
Mr. Chair and Board, good evening.
Good evening.
This fire chief report, we've changed it up a bit, so hopefully you enjoy the new PowerPoint slides, although there's a reason and intent for it. What we thought would be a good idea would we jump off the fiscal year, having each of the divisions report out on several priorities that they're going to manage and work through this year. You'll note as they give their presentations, they'll talk about how these priorities integrate with the strategic plan and budget, which we've talked a lot about this last fiscal year. So before we kick off, what I would say is our executive staff here is exceptional. Assistant Chief Jason Coyle, Director of Admin Heidi Robinson, our Division Chief over Operational Support Ed Mazulis, our Division Chief over CRR, also our Fire Marshal Dory Booth. When I think about the 144 or so fire districts in the state of Arizona, I put this executive staff up against any of them. What's that mean? Well, it means they're highly professional, they're engaged, they know how to lead, they know how to manage their divisions, they know how to set priorities. Well, what's the benefit of that? This district's going on a very positive forward trajectory. So, I'm honored to let them report out. I'm excited. I looked at these and we talked on our one-on-ones, but I think this is a good night as we start this fiscal year to jump off and let your professionals and your experts in the Sedona Fire District report out and give you a little more detail. And again, we're not talking about covering their whole division and all their responsibilities. We're talking about several priorities in each that filter to the top that are impactful, that are strategic, and that are really empowering this district. So, having given that brief introduction, I'll go ahead and hit our response. There's 2 response slides. Year to date, we're sitting about as we did last year, with a small increase this year. And then you can see a breakdown again by station response, which again is pretty consistent with our call volume month to month. So I do want our executives to have some time to center a bit, to relax, to open up to you. Again, I can't think more highly of these 4 individuals than how I just introduced, because again, We got a great team, and we got great leadership, and, you'll see that tonight. So, with that, I wanna turn it over to administration, our Director of Administrative Services, Heidi Robinson.
Thank you, Chief, members of the board. So with our new format, we're looking at what our priorities are for the coming fiscal year. So since we're starting off the fiscal year, it's a good time to do that. Instead of telling you what's coming up on a daily or monthly basis, we kind of want to do an overview of what administration is going to be focusing on, giving just our top 3 priorities. Other things will come up, and we'll work with them as we go. But to let you know how we're doing this, how it aligns with both the budget and our strategic planning. So our first priority is, we talked about as we first walked in here, is the design and launch of our new website. So the picture there is of the old website, and that will no longer be there soon. We have weekly meetings, sometimes bi-weekly meetings, the fire chief and myself and our web designer. We're making excellent progress, getting some photography, some story ideas from Chief Coyle, and getting that put together when we have a little bit of the progress report on that, getting more of a shell, something to look at. We'll get together a focus group of a couple board members and some community members and see how it is as far as navigation, if we're on the right track, and then we'll proceed from there. Get it out there so that directors or division chiefs and assistant chiefs and anyone in charge of an area will be able to get in there and actually make edits, so that we can do things like update on the fire and smoke conditions and closures and training and good things happening in the district, rather than it just be a feed, have it be something that we can actually get in and edit. So we're really looking forward to that, making good progress. We've had a few hiccups just with meeting delays and availability, but we do anticipate in the next month or two to really have a product that we can not only show to you, but then also launch to the public. So with the strategic planning, it's something that we talked about. That's our communication. It's making the community aware of what we're doing, making sure that we're showcasing that, being informative, and responsive as well to the community. And budgeted items, this is something that was taken care of out of the surplus fund. So back a couple fiscal years now, we're finally being able to get this to come to fruition. That is where the funding for this project came from. Our second priority, lovely photo of our central file room. What we're looking to do is digitize our files, as many of them as we can, and we're starting with accounts payable and accounts receivable. So, Michelle Miller, our administrative generalist, has jumped just, because she knows it well. She decided to jump right in. We had a discussion about how we're trying to move to a more robust office package, so doing that Microsoft 365, also part of the surplus funding that would fund that project, and starting at a place where we're getting ourselves off paper. So finance obviously uses a lot of paper, receipts, invoices, proof of payment, and she's been working diligently, starting right at the beginning of the fiscal year, to begin her new process, which she's really excited about. And then we're gonna cascade it through the other departments, HR, payroll, and then on throughout the process, so that we can, once we get a paper document, we scan it in, we digitize it, we file it appropriately where it's gonna go, so it's accessible, and it's a permanent document there, that it can be accessed by you, by the public, anywhere we need, according to public records rules. And then that paper goes away, and we can shred it, recycle it, and get it out of our file cabinet. So there's certain records that we will be keeping as paper records, so you're thinking those ones that are kept in perpetuity. Certainly those are gonna remain. We're working with the state library system to make sure that as much of that gets off of our property as possible and is stored in a facility that's meant to retain documents. So we're looking at that as part of our strategic plan, is being sustainable, and it's also being transparent. So making sure that we have everything stored and accessible in a way that benefits everyone who needs to access them. And then our third priority is something that we've been working on in the past and that we're carrying forward, and I think we've made really good progress, is standardizing the recruitment process for all of our positions. So starting back when we sought a fire chief several years ago, we contracted with an outside firm, put together a really robust process for how to do a recruitment, a search for a high-level position. And we've taken that format of competency-based searching and making sure that we have accuracy in our job descriptions and accuracy in our announcements, making them enticing, making sure that we're doing that marketing and selling ourselves, and have layered that down to each position we've sought since, and continuing the process at the lower levels and even in our internal recruitment and promotion process. So getting that is not to say that it's a cookie cutter, but that we've got a really good format that we can just take over to the next process. And now we know all the pieces we can check off the list of what we need to do outside evaluators, get the job description up to date, post it on these particular sites. So getting that really tight and improving the process each time we go through has been a goal of HR, it's a goal of mine and of the chief, and we're getting really close to that. So that's our focus this year, is to really memorialize every process that we do. We're coming up on another process, and we want to make sure that we memorialize that as well, going right down through the list again, to BC, to engineer, captain, firefighter, and all of our admin positions as well. So part of that process that's in the strategic planning is making sure that we have that transparent, that we're making sure that we are recruiting and we're retaining our people, and making sure that we make this a good place to work, and recruiting, hiring, and encouraging folks to stay, getting that longevity is all part of that process.
Do you have any questions for Heidi? I will state that, doing job descriptions as we have for as long as we have, sometimes patience is a good thing. And to get it done completely and all-inclusive, and now we're at a point where we can have those things standardized in this format. We don't have all the room in the world, so to go to digitized files is gonna be a huge plus. And I'm excited and waiting for that new website to come on board, so good work.
Hey, Dave, so do I understand the new website will be designed such a way that different departments will be able to do some of their own editing, or will go back to a central?
Right, that's the intent, is that the editing will come from the people who have the content, so instead of it having to be distributed in another format. So again, we have an email here and a document there, and then somebody has to go in and do the work when they have time and then publish it. We're gonna get to the point where we have it, that Ed started an update in his division, he would be able to make that edit. We make sure that the spelling, grammar is all good, and click publish, and we're good to go. So same with each of our major divisions, being able to post their events, being able to post a warning, being able to post a press release, so that the fire marshal should be able to go in there and make an edit, change a class format, and code changes, that page can be alerted, and that information can go out. It doesn't have to be.
That'll be a remarkable change.
It will indeed.
I mean, other organizations will use you as a model, or the district as a model, because it's a problem across the board. And there's multiple layers.
That's our goal. So we want it to be organized. We want it to have the same tone. We want to make sure that we've got good language and all the grammar, all of those things that are there. So just giving a quick overview on that portion of it, but we want it to be that our receptionist has the ability to go into the page that she needs to work on and be able to post an announcement like a closure due to a meeting, or when we all go off district to attend a memorial, or if we're in training and some classes get canceled. We should all be able to make those edits, and this product is gonna allow us that ability. Yeah. Thank you. Very efficient.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll transition over to operations as Assistant Chief Jason Quall.
I was operator here. I was not pressing the right place. Okay, so I took a little different approach to my homework assignment than Heidi did. So, if you bear with me, I think it'll still be beneficial. All right, so, the first thing I did when I looked at when the chief asked me to pick a few goals and provide an update on them, was, in my mind, a strategy is right between the vision and the implementation of the plan. And so, one of the approaches that I like for, I'm trying to implement a strategy, is something that I didn't come up with it, but Special Forces did. It's called the SOCOM Design Way, but it's like strategy light. It's not the big, robust military strategy machine, but it provides a framework. And the first part about it is to appreciate the context. So looking forward to the next 2, 3, 5 years with the items you have listed out there, some of the things that I came up with about the context that I think are important for us to appreciate is that the pandemic has changed us, and our collective perspective related to work. Had to work longer and harder to reach the same goals over the last several years in this environment, and people hit the wall. So recognizing that, just asking people to do more with less as we try to implement these strategies, is probably not appreciating the actual environment we're in right now and the stressors that people have been placed under over the last several years. And kind of back that up, Microsoft did a workplace assessment. So 43% of the workplace reporters considering leaving its job, and the main reason was not pay, but unsustainable workload, and the largest contributor to this was time spent collaborating. So under this hybrid environment, this remote environment, people having to deal with family, kids home sick, homeschooling, all that kind of stuff, trying to collaborate has made it a lot harder on them. And so that was another thing I thought we should recognize. There's stuff about the environment, and a lot of this you don't probably know, but the S&P 500 fell 20% between January and June. Inflation's at a 4-year high, and commodities such as copper fell 15% since April. So while inflation is at a high, there's indicators that the economy is already slowing. One of those other factors that's contributing to the environment when we come to these large projects is the zero COVID policy in China that they've implemented has continued to cause slowdowns in the supply chain, and that has continued to keep price up on commodities that come from there. Central banks are raising interest rates, and they're tightening their monetary policy as a way to slow that. The United States raises interest rates, more people want to come invest in us because they get a better return. But how that affects these other economies that we depend on is unknown. High energy and wages impact almost all aspects of what we do here at Sonoma Fire District, whether it's with the trucks on the road or it's paying for each individual person to give them a competitive wage, so that a living wage. The benefit of providing an opening economy has blown through, and all the factors that could combine with it that could combine to cause a recession. So what I mean by that is that there's all this stimulus money, and then the economy opened up and people started spending this money, and there were supply shortages, so prices went up. And now, as we blow through that money and we're doing all this monetary tightening, probable is a fair way to put it, that we'll be in a recession in the next couple years, in the next year. One of the things that will be different about this recession than recessions years past is that normally when we go into a recession, inventories are high, and historically there's like the 2008 recession, the 2001 dot-com bubble, people's savings were really low. So this recession is different because inventories are high. So it's not like there's stuff that people have to sell off the shelf, and people have saved more money because I think they're more considerate of these shocks because they've seen a lot of these shocks over the last couple years. So all that put together about appreciating the context is that when we come to, especially the projects that I picked up here, they involve a lot of money. And, at least what I've been taught is that when you are working in an environment that has a lot of uncertainty, being iterative about how you approach the problems and incremental to how you execute on solutions, so you allow yourself to have decision space for as long as possible, is beneficial. And I think one of the easiest ways to illustrate that is that the Fed, below 2% annual inflation has been the goal for at least 20 years. And so if you're in an environment like we had been up until last year, where we're sitting in those low inflationary times, we're at 1.5, 2.5, and we're right around that 2% number, pushing out our planning horizon to 5 years and deciding what we're going to do in a stable environment makes a lot of sense. but pushing out the planning horizon to 5 years of what we're gonna do in an environment like this, I would submit that there would be a lot of inaccuracies in our projections. And if we're able to project it accurately, we're in the wrong business. We should be running one of these big Fed banks or working for Goldman Sachs or something and making a lot of money. So when I looked at how to define the problem, I said, you know, with regards to strategies, I'll discuss each one of the problems, how we calibrate. And I think the last point on that I want to make is that another thing that is at least important for me to remember is, no matter how bad I want to do something, if the maximum available is less than the minimum required, we need to make an adjustment. The strategy needs to change. So the maximum of whatever, whether it's hotshot crews on a forest fire, or whether it's money in the bank for us to be able to build something, if the maximum available is less than the minimum required, something needs to be. And, so if we look at this, I looked at identifying the critical factors as far as developing an approach that would affect the outcome of the decision, evaluate the options, anticipate actions, and then reason through context as we go through here. So that was the approach I took to address these problems. And you know, the one with the 6.2, work collaborative stakeholders to develop and maintain a multi-agency wildland fire management program. This one is far less influenced by those shocks, and there's a lot of different things that have been done to help with that cohesive strategy that are ongoing. One is that I got myself in a position to be able to represent Arizona on the Western Fire Chiefs Association Wildland Policy Committee, and collectively, we did a little letter writing campaign, and the director of the Wildland Fire Policy Committee, he is a member now of the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission. So that was what was just formed with the money from the stimulus package for fuels treatment and everything. So now we have a seat at the table, and the rest of that plan, if you will, is to make sure that we introduce him to any of the other people we know that are on the committee, which there's 3 other that I know that are on the committee, so we can work collaboratively towards goals that benefit the Sedona Fire District and other areas that have high risk. So that was probably like the highest level one. But then, you know, I'm Todd Miranda back here because there's a lot of work that's been done to identify the importance of training and qualification, wildland fire support and equipment, and make sure that we have properly equipped and trained firefighters, and that they have the experience necessary to make high-quality decisions in that environment. And why I think that fits under here is because that certainly involves the collaboration of stakeholders, because they interface with the Forest Service in areas prior to, on incidents prior to the fire. So when we have our event, like we just, you know, like this little community fire that's going on right now, we're all able to integrate. And I think, I'll skip down to the last one here, that I continue to look for opportunities to coordinate with stakeholders. And I think that one of the better ways to do that, if not one of the best ways to do that, is like something that just happened on the committee fire as an example. The city has been wanting to work on an evacuation plan. It's one of their stated goals. And when we were on the committee fire, we looked at the areas that along 179 where the fire was the closest. It wasn't appropriate to put people in evacuation status, but it would be beneficial if that was needed to be done, that we had the evacuation zone set. So, I volunteered to help them do that. Went over yesterday to the city with both county sheriffs and with the city of Sedona with Stephanie Foley, and Karen Davis was there as well, and we went through everything in Uptown and along 179 in the Chapel area and defined evacuation zones. And so now we have those on a map. It has utility for this incident, and it's also gives us, 50% of the way done. We're doing them for the rest of the city. So taking opportunities when these events occur and doing that extra little bit of collaboration and coordination so we can elevate, so we can not only address the problem right now, but set us up for being able to address the problem in the future. Is one of the approaches we've taken. So the next one, 9.2, is to optimize new and existing facilities to meet current and future needs. So this, really, the whole reason I went through that stuff before about the environment has a lot to do with this particular strategic goal. And there's Station 4 specifically, Station 4, is a difficult place to build. It's gonna be an expensive place to get out of the ground, and there's probably a large amount of variability between what is estimated to occur and what actually occurs when we start digging everything up there. So, potential cost there, additional potential cost. So the chief and I talked about this, and one of the things that we discussed and that I would propose is that the objective on this over the next year is to get to having a set of biddable plans and getting a price. And well, my suggestion to the board would be that we just do that as a step. That, it's not like we get there and if it sounds good, we're gonna keep going, but that is a decision point. So we're able to come back to the board with a set of biddable plans, and we're able to go out and get a price for the station based on those plans. Then we evaluate the current environment, and especially when it relates to the next item we're gonna talk about, and we make a determination, y'all make a determination and give us guidance on how to move forward. Because I don't know what price is gonna be like the next year, and I know what they've done already. And so I think being iterative about this right now would it would be an appropriate way to approach the problem. I think something else we could do after we get that process moving forward is determine the process necessary, start working on that to gain U.S. Forest Service support for facility near Slide Rock for moving Station 5 further up we can. We benefit our constituents that right now are too far away from the station to enjoy the same ISO rating that the majority of the district does. It will put us in a place that provides a better access to some of the areas where we're most calls up there. And it would allow us to get a facility that is ours, and then we would have concerns about the use for in the long term. But that process is complex, but it's complex for a different reason. So once, like, we got a piece of bare ground up there, at least there's nothing underneath the grid, and we don't have to worry about trying to do something. You know, we just put fences around and build stuff. Even if we're building rock, it's gonna be less complex than what's going on at Station 4. And then the last one was, improvements to existing facilities. And we know if we future out the two things I just talked about, we're gonna be in Station 1 for a long time. We have a lot of different, we have mountaintop sites, a lot, 5 or 6, that, historically, we waited until, an HVAC unit or something fails to go replace it. And we look back at some of the causes of radio problems that we've had, and especially the more serious ones over the years. Losing climate control in those locations has been the primary cause of those failures. And then something overheats and then it goes out. And so updating all the HVAC systems in those stations, making sure that everything at those locations is on generator power, the generators are properly sized, the uninterruptible power supplies are adequate, and that the HVAC units, if the average life is 15 years for a barred wall-mounted unit, then change them out at 13 in a scheduled way, and, you know, stagger that by 3 or 4 years at least, you know, for each one, so they're of the same age, and then make sure that we have the right equipment stuff up there, and then have sensing equipment, so when the temperature gets to a certain point, we're alerted there, and not alerted by a radio system failure. So that doesn't require special equipment, requires money, but that's something we can work on in the interim while we're trying to figure out this next item that provides value for the entire system. So then moving on to the last strategy, it's 9.3, ensure telecommunications support organizational needs. So I'd ask Bob Moats to start tracking all of the different failures that we've had on the radio systems and what the cause of those failures were. And that information is useful as we go through this list, because one of the main causes of failures is some switching devices. And I think there's been 5 times a week probably on certain weeks that we've lost Station 3 Channel 3 at Station 3 for a period of time due to these failures. Bob's been able to remote in and fix them, but unfortunately, they're passive failures. It's not like a light comes on and says the radio doesn't work. We tend to find out that the radio doesn't work when you try to heat up the radio and you need it to work. So, that's not the type of failure that we had to choose failures, we'd rather have one that causes alarm bells to go off instead of one that just happens and you don't know it happens until it's been used. So, working with Pegasus, they're continuing to work on the capital plan as requested by Chief Troutman that combines elements of the current scope of work into a comprehensive multi-year plan to identify the work that needs to be done. And so what I asked them to do was I gave them 4 goals, or 4 kind of buckets, if you will. The first one was, what immediate actions do we need to take to reduce the frequency of radio system failures? And so, in my mind, that's thing 1, is reduce the actual failures first. And in the short term, it's stuff that's ongoing. It's the replacement, the board's already approved, it's the replacement of that data transport network switches and the routers. And the next thing to do is, what actions need to be done to provide for a more reliable system overall. And the long-term that's replacing radio equipment, facilities improvements, and the replacement of radio infrastructure. It also includes redundant connectivity to radio sites, so we don't have any single-point failures. And again, Pegasus has offered to provide project management services to continue to do this work. Of course, we got a fee. And then the next one was asked, what actions we need to take to build in an appropriate amount of redundancy to make our system less likely to be taken down by those single-point failures. And a lot of it is the work that was done in the previous, that I just talked about a moment ago. And then the other one was just incorporating redundancies at all levels so that failures are apparent to the system, but they don't take down the system. Then we're able to fix those in a more scheduled manner, and we're not trying to fix it with, baling wire and bubble gum, put it back together because it's broken and it doesn't work. We're facing one of those issues right now with a GPS clock that we have to replace these clocks by September 17th, or Channel 3 goes down. It's all about the synchronizing stuff, and it sounds very Y2K-ish, but it's real. And so it's something that that's not very far out for something that happens once every 19 years. We need to get that planning horizon further out. Then finally, the last one was what actions we need to take to enhance the system, is what I asked them to do. What actions we need to take to enhance the system and coverage to all the areas within the district where our current system is inadequate. So there's 2 different approaches to that were identified. One is developing additional radio sites, which is a time-consuming process. Nobody likes to see these big ugly towers up on the hill, so it's probably more about where can we sneak littler sites in that are near existing stuff where it's not going to create an uproar. And the other one was some of the technology solutions in FirstNet or Verizon Frontline, which is like the Verizon version of their FirstNet, which is an AT&T product for emergency communication. So incorporating all those different levels and the work with Pegasus, it's the intent is to provide a capital plan and then to have those phased out and estimates on costs associated with those. When I finish this phase 2 of the Pegasus contract over the next several months. My suggestion to the board would be is that we, like I said, we keep moving forward on the other item with getting to a set of biddable plans. When we get to the set of biddable plans, and we have the information that we need from Pegasus to be able to assign a cost to all this high priority radio work that needs to be done so we can meet our primary mission, then that will be the point to evaluate and make those hard choices on, do we adjust the capital plan? What's the priority moving forward? Do we borrow more money? We'll have numbers. We'll have numbers for you all to be able to sit down, get them engaged, and give us half a dozen different options on ways to do things. But I thought I'd pick 3 easy ones to tackle the first one. But anyhow, that's the end of what I had to report on, so thank you.
Thank you.
What did he say?
Chief, a lot of work went into your report, and a lot of work by a lot of people. And it's that kind of work that nobody notices, asks Well, what is it you do? And it's work that if it doesn't get done, you won't know what you do until it fails, and it can be catastrophic. First of all, I want to say thank you for all the insight to those different things. The stakeholder thing and being at the table in the wildland arena is something we kind of take for granted a little bit, because wildland firefighting is somewhere way over there. Well, it was just right up our street just the other day. So we realize how important it is to have someone at the table to make, or to assist in making decisions. So for that, and those that you worked with on that, thank you.
Got a couple of those gentlemen are here right now, so.
Thank you, guys. You know, Chief, you started this portion of your report with a staff that is second to none. And two of us on this board come from large fire departments, that we have the same sentiment, that we would put any of these guys against any of those at any time. And for that, I thank you guys for the job that you guys do. Having an evacuation review, if you will, I could see that the ability to give an evacuation, you know, we're now at the go, everybody go, could again be catastrophic. But to do it in segments well ahead of time, knowing what the previous days or several days have shown that it's coming my way, let's start getting this ball rolling, is extremely important. And I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the road we actually do a community exercise. Let's see what happens. You never know. Fire Station 4, I've got an idea that is going to be expensive, just because we don't know what's underground or where it's at or how deep it is. I would entertain an idea of flipping the station from where it's currently located up to the vacant parking lot up on top, where we know the ground is somewhat clean, if you will, underneath, and creating the parking lot down below. Something to consider. Pegasus versus IT. It's something that we have to look at, figure out what's best for this district, for the tax holders, taxpayers here. For years, we have done just as you explained. We've looked for parts and pieces all across the world through social media, and we've made it work. We got to get past that. And it's the groundwork that you're doing now, the work that we don't see, like I first opened up my comment, that will make the difference 4 or 5 years down the road, so that whatever troubles we have now will not exist then, hopefully. So for that portion of your report, Chief, through operations, thank you. It was insightful, or it was informational, not insightful, I guess. But it was informational, and I truly appreciate all the work you've done. Thank you, Chief.
Just full disclosure too, I aggregated the information that has been going on over the last several weeks and months with the chief and Pegasus, that, you know, I was not a party to those meetings during that time I was on that fire, but I was able to take that information and get Pegasus to be able to put it all together.
Super. Any other comments?
The only thing is, I really appreciate the emergency evacuation. I got numerous phone calls the other night, everybody thinking, oh, you're on fire, you must have insight. The insight I had is to go to the fire district's communication, to the Facebook, and go to the incident of the Forest Service. I was trying to find all the links, and people were panicking. They thought the world was coming to an end, but where do I take my pets? And so I appreciate the working with the city and the other stakeholders to get together and say, look, what is our plan? And how do you phase it? That would give comfort to people that know that somebody's in charge of this. They were ready to jump.
But, Alex, to be fair, I mean, when you see 300-foot flame wings, and then all of a sudden, that wind stops blowing hard, and all the smoke settles down, and ash is falling on your houses, and you can't see the fire anymore.
Yeah.
I'm certain that caused a lot of angst in people, and it was hard to message out exactly what it was, because honestly, at that time, we weren't sure how far down off the rim it come, because it happened so quickly. So, very visible event.
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Rutland?
Chief Coyle. We will go to Community Risk Reduction, Division Chief Dory Booth.
It's only taken me 8 months to figure out to hold on to the mic and hope it works. So kind of a similar strategy, Chief Coyle, went over the strategic plan that I fell in on. So reality, community risk reduction, all of our tasks and sections overlap a lot. To include the community risk reduction, kind of reaches out and touches every section, and relies upon each section to be successful. First strategy, 3.1, provide a comprehensive fire and life safety inspection and review area. First task is making sure all the members that are assigned to community risk reduction has accessibility to ongoing training, whether it's internal or external, and getting them out to National Fire Academy, the State Fire School, as well as internal. One success that we've had already, Eric Riddell yesterday passed his International Code Council Fire Inspector 1 certification, so we've got one notch to start the first month of the fiscal year out, and continue to grow that way. We're starting to see more interest in operations, wanting to attend trainings that are community risk reduction based, whether it's arson, fire investigation, or inspection. The other key component of this is amending and adopting the 2018 International Fire Code with a systematic approach to make sure that we can continue to build the resiliency and safety for the residents, visitors, and our first responders. And that includes talking with International Code Council, technical writers, to make sure that our amendments published and properly written to go forward, and coordinating with the State Fire Marshal's Office and other Verde Valley fire districts to make sure that there is some level of cohesion and similarity, since we do mutual aid and automatic response to a degree, that the firefighters across the Verde Valley have the same level of expectation going into compromised building or event that they would in their jurisdiction. Priority number 2, enhancing and collection, dissemination of functional data. So this is just kind of making sure that we've got those dashboards that we've been discussing back and forth, utilizing the technology that we have. So the iPlans table that we purchased last fiscal year has been essential as we start to transition over to electronic plan review only. It's also coming in handy. We've got some blasting that's being proposed for the parking garage uptown, as well as the Forest Road connector. We're able to use the touchscreen portion of that for blasting radius and kind of see what buildings are impacted, coordinating with different departments on that level. Strategy 3.3, providing public education programs focusing on identifying at-risk populations within the community. This includes fire-wise assessments and continuing growing that cooperators partnership with different agencies across the region. Make sure that we continue to be resilient and have public education, public events to help clean up, and just continue educating the entire district, because in essence, we are an at-risk community in general when it comes to fire sheds and fire hazards. What I'm saying is relaunching our pub ed and public information program, stepping up the Facebook page, and Heidi and Chief doing a lot of the work on the new website, so that'll help us further our reach as well as a marketing plan. Also, trying to get out into the public more for just Q&A sessions. We did something similar with board member McCarthy's church for a fire extinguisher training, but we also had about an hour of just Q&A and sitting there and talking to some of the citizens in the area and getting to know each other. What's important to the community really should be important to the district, is we can help build that gap or bridge the gap that may be lacking. Overall, I think that community risk reduction has a lot of room to grow, and I'm blessed with a great team that's currently there, and the support of the executive team, the board, and the members on the floor are supportive of the program, as each other, and that's important. A lot of places don't have that support, and it really is kind of one of the fundamental pillars of the fire service, is making sure that things are stable, stable as they can be in a really bad situation.
Anything for,
I have a friend who wants to firewise her house. She wants to remove trees, only to find out there's rules about removing trees. And so it is a very I never thought there were rules about removing trees. And so citizens that want to do the right thing, because that's the path that modern fire is going, need all the help you can give them so that they know to be brave and willing to actually talk about removing trees if that's what it would take to make their house safe.
Kind of go on with that, there are zoning rules for landscaping and trees, but one thing that we're working on is that relationship with not only Coconino and Yavapai County zoning officials, but also the city of Sedona. So if we get a complaint or somebody requests for us to come out and take a look at their property for a firewise assessment, we identify trees that maybe need to be removed. We work with the city or the counties to explain to them the fire hazards, and then they do come off of the more stringent requirements from there. But they have to ask, just like you said, they have to be brave enough to ask the question and get us involved to help kind of navigate that system so they don't get in trouble. And it's the same thing with HOAs. There's a lot of CCNRs that they have established that prevent removing trees and shrubs and landscaping because it doesn't fit the design criteria, but things are changing. So educating the governing boards of the HOAs is one of the things we have to do so we can continue growing our entire district as a fire-wise community more than just pockets.
I see great value in that.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank Chief Booth for the communications on Facebook over the last several days. It was a godsend for those of us like Al. I find that my neighbors reach out to me and say, where do I get the information? So I want to thank you for that and for being proactive and putting that out there. I also actually have, and in the spirit of what Chief Coyle was talking about, a suggestion generally. I think there was a general level of uncertainty, and anxiety is probably the right word, not just for the people who were east of 179, but for the entire community. And I would really like to encourage even more communication, starting with things as basic as, is everybody doing ready? I think a lot of people forget about Ready, Set, Go, because the first thing you get notified is set. And I think in a situation like where we've been in, reminding people about Ready is an opportunity for communication. So, I mean, I'm cheering you on. I think you're doing great. You've done great things. I think thinking that we in the public are probably less informed than you think we are, and more prone to panic, and more prone to anxiety, and it falls to a number of us to try and cool that down a bit. The other thing I was going to suggest, and I spoke with the chair a little bit about this, is perhaps we could set up something by way of they used to be called telephone trees, but I call it a communication tree, so that things that you're going to communicate also come to the board. So we have the information up front, so we can share it as well. Because I've been happy to share it on Nextdoor, to share it with the people on my email list. So just a couple of suggestions, but again, bravo, loved what you did. Just wish early on, when people were really anxious, it would have been nice to have some more information to share. So thank you. Yeah.
Janet, anything?
Thank you for that. It's funny, I made a 4-minute video in my truck that night, just explaining what was going on. I was like, I didn't want to get ahead of the Forest Service message or say something that was contrary. And I should have just trusted my gut and put that out there, because even if it would have been a little off as far as fire location, it would have gotten the information out about people that need to worry, and there's a lot of room, everything else that you're talking about ahead of time, and I didn't do it. Still have the video. Okay. So, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you, Chief Troutman. Who's up next?
Well, we'll have, Division Chief Ed Mazzillis over Operational Support, Inc., or our executive reports.
All right. So priority one is, strategy 4.1, which is identify organizational training needs and provide measurable outcomes. And see if there says retool and update task books. Our operational employees have what's called a task book, and it's just that. If you want to move from firefighter to the truck operator, the engineer, or engineer to captain, captain to BC, it's a book full of tasks that you must complete. And we've been utilizing this program for a number of years. And you know, with any program, to maintain success, you need to revise it, and you need to take a look at it periodically. And that takes time, because you may have 2 BC task books open over a 5-year period. So to get feedback on that task book, it takes a while. But what we've recognized, in large part to our members' feedback, is those books can be more relevant. And essentially, for an engineer, it'll be properly check the truck for daily operation, and then they've got to prove that they can do that to their supervisor, and they get that box checked and signed off, and so on and so forth. And the complexity increases as you move up the ranks. A captain's going to have to know a lot more administrative functions and use of our software programs. And that's where we daylighted the fact that over the past 5 years, one example is we've instituted a ton of new softwares for, checking our trucks and different programs that we use. And, we did initial training, but the reinforcement of that isn't as robust as we'd like to see it. And one of the biggest struggles for me is our organization, is getting set for a pretty big transition with a lot of our senior staff, captains and up, sunsetting, if you will. And, there's a lot of folks, a majority of our captains and all of our battalion level chiefs and above are all, will be or are eligible for retirement, now or in the next 3 to 5 years. And so, one thing that, talking with staff, we recognize is our task book program, we kind of designed as a bottom-up, process where somebody wants to promote up the ranks, they request a task book, and then they initiate it, and then with training, and then they go through the process. And I think we're at a point now where beyond just retooling and updating, we need to kind of shift the mindset to where that task book process is both ways. There are those folks that are self-motivated, but then there are also those folks that are unsure or just don't completely understand the process. So one of the pushes with this particular priority is this year I want to retool the process so that the training division is actively talking to the battalion chiefs and the captains and saying, hey, who's our next guy or gal for this? Who's showing interest in this, and who wants to take on a project but doesn't understand what projects we need? And as a district, it'll help us focus our training dollars on those folks that are wanting to move up the ranks, and it'll also help us, by asking more questions from the top down, understand who wants to do what, because there's nothing wrong with being a firefighter, EMT for 20 years. We need those folks, and having somebody that's salty in that seat is a big deal too. But as an organization, if we're going to identify the right people to keep the fire chief telling the board that we got the right people, we need to do some more on our end from the top down to help support these folks in their growth. Priority 2 is related to Goal 5. And Goal 5 loosely talks about improving community health through effective pre-hospital medical service interventions. A lot of cool words. But essentially, what we're focusing on with that this year is standardizing our EMS consumable inventory. And we budgeted for this. And essentially what it is, we've got with speaking to Chief Coyle's point, a guy would say, hey, we're out of whatever, I'd punch an order in the next couple of days to get here. Well, that's not the case anymore. Stuff's on back order. We'll order more of something because I know I can't get them very frequently or they're difficult to obtain. So if I find 5 and we need 2, I'll order the 5. And there's some lost efficiencies with that. And, some of our devices where a Band-Aid's 0.08 cents, some of the needles we use are $110 a piece. So you have 2 of those times 5 stations expire, that's a lot of money, over the long run. And so, the ESO software that we use for our incident management and our patient care reports and our training management has a module that we adopted a few months ago that manages inventory. And going to, in the next month or two, implement a process where all of our stations have the exact same inventory of supplies. And then we had a committee work on determining what our central supply will require to keep those stations stocked. And we're kind of revamping how we get equipment out to the staff, and then it'll be an electronic format where they can indicate what their shortages are, and it's anybody that's been in retail, it's what we're doing is what retail figured out 30 years ago, but it's gonna work for us. And there's a lot of robust management systems out there for consumable equipment. And a lot of the larger fire districts we went and looked at in some of the fire departments, but, I said, so how do you guys keep your stuff stocked? Oh, it's easy. Our firefighters push the buttons on what's missing, and then it goes to our warehouse facility, and the warehouse manager generates a report of what's needed, and then the driver gets in the van from the warehouse and delivers all the supplies. I'm like, okay, you just described what we have one guy for. So this system, after review, I think will work the best. It works for the scale of organization we are. And ultimately, it's gonna increase our efficiencies because our crews will have what they need without having to worry about restock or pulling it from somewhere or search all the stations, hey, do you have any extra or whatever. And then ultimately, over time, it will reduce costs of our EMS consumables because we'll have a better mechanism for tracking them. So that's one of our EMS focuses, and that's priority 2. And then priority 3 fits into goal 7, which is maintain a safe and operational mission-driven fleet management program. When we dreamed up, I owned a lot of this one, I had this dream of really drilling down with Mike and getting him to be the software superstar. And Mike Sheehan, our mechanic, our fleet supervisor, is incredibly smart. Then I was beaten in the head by Captain Tarver, who was on light duty, and he had a weird window, a week-long light duty where he could do stuff but not fully operational, and he helped out in the shop for the week. And after 2 days in, he came to me and said, you know how much crap Mike deals with? He goes, you know what our guys do with this and that and everything else, and they're asking him about this, and what it led me to discover is the fact that Mike's working hard, and the software piece is pretty easy for him to pick up, but it's the total package that's the issue. And so, Cap Tarver and a couple other folks mentioned, hey, why don't we put together a committee and have our new engineers do a week in the shop and see what really goes on behind the curtain. And 2, we have a software that manages our fleet maintenance. If there's a broken bolt, we submit it to a tracking software that alerts Mike. And the loop closure on, hey, I replaced the bolt is one part of the process we're gonna work on related to goal 7. The second part is, tying back to the priority 1, is we're gonna deliver better training to our company officers to help them better understand how to close that software loop. And it sounds kind of simple on the surface, but just knowing the status of our apparatus and our equipment from a remote location and better understanding what Mike's daily requirements are, better allowing us to track what is Mike doing to preventatively maintain our equipment, and what is he doing that's a stop everything you're doing, it's an emergency. And is it 70-30? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? We don't have good numbers on that. And so the real goal of priority 3 is streamlining the process, is bringing the end user in, building that relationship with Mike to better understand shop and user needs, and then leverage the software we already have to better utilize it. Because again, it's fairly new, it's a few years old, and everybody's comfortable with it now. And so, it's like training for a race. Everybody's comfortable running a mile now, so now we're gonna bump it up to 2 miles. And put the ownership on everybody more evenly. And then I think, it'll help deliver better information on our future needs, if, you know, what our future needs as far as personnel look like in the shop. And so that's the three priorities we're focusing on, and, this elephant's getting eaten one bite at a time. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Any comments for, Chief Mizoulas?
That's great.
You know, I'm always curious, and I find, you know, dealing with the whole concept of EMS, the one thing I picked up from being on the fire board these past few years is how sophisticated medical services are that are supplied through the emergency medical service and paramedics, and how often the general public has no idea how much skill sets come and equipment and the ability to provide emergency services almost like MASH or military-like, you know, that you save people's lives. And whether you go to an emergency room or an emergency room at a hospital or you call a helicopter, I mean,
Yeah.
they don't realize that there's really a medical system in place in this little rural area of Arizona that's extremely sophisticated. They don't understand, you know, necessarily how the system works. So I really appreciate the idea that this is an evolving organization where getting the word out to the public as to how services are applied and the decisions that are made in the ambulance sometimes aren't necessarily to go to an emergency room closest, but to head to someplace where the right type of equipment is waiting for them with the right type of personnel, if you get my point.
I do, and that's one of my little pipe dreams with the website redo is where we can provide functional, updated content about all the divisions, but specific to EMS, you know, just more of a, you know, talking points, you know, we could update periodically, and then it's the other piece is our social media. Our BCs do a great job of posting the who's and what's of what we're doing, and I'm not discounting the feedback from our public, but by and large, it's thank you guys so much. We appreciate you, and we appreciate that feedback. But how could we get the public to ask us, well, how did you guys, or why did you do it this way? I don't even know if they'd want to ask that. But to your point, like how do we get the questions so that we can answer them? You know what I mean? You know, and like, because we want to teach and educate our public, but and then Helen mentioned it. It's like. And Chief Coyle mentioned it with the video. It's like we have these ideas, but how do we know who wants to know what?
Well, you know, ambulance services 30 years ago and ambulance services now, it's two totally different worlds.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a feeling that older consumers still think it's 30 years ago, and they haven't caught up with the fact that you have a hospital coming to your house on wheels, in a way.
Oh, and in a lot of ways, that's very true. And I'm hoping post-COVID, working with Dory, we can get back out in the public and do those interactions and hopefully answer some of these questions. Thank you for your feedback.
I hate to propose more work,
No?
so take this lightly, but it seems to me from what you're saying and what Al's saying, what I said, that it might be worthwhile thinking about doing a communication plan, looking at who your audiences are, not only what they need to know, but what they want to know, and also how to reach them, and then you can plan the communications, you know, not just the emergency communications, but just the routine communications, what organizations do to market themselves. Well, really, what you have is a marketing challenge. So we put together a communications plan with the audiences and the ways you can reach, and then you don't have to do it all at once, but you can bite off the pieces of the elephant as you have the opportunity.
Anything?
I just personally want to thank everybody for updating everything that has to be updated for quite a while now. So this is, to me, very exciting. It's such a good step forward, and I am looking forward to seeing all of these improvements functioning, because it sounds like they're all going to function beautifully and way more efficiently.
You know, I'd just like to add a couple things here, is that this presentation, the way it was here on the hard copy on the slides, along with the presentation given by all your chief staff, your chief administrative staff here, that it has caused more discussion than we've had in a long, long time, all to the positive. From administratively to operations, community risk reduction, and operational. I failed to mention that when Chief Booth gave her presentation, that you mentioned something to the effect of promotional tests or inspectors or something like that. It's also important that our membership understand that it is definitely on the road to becoming a captain or an officer, and it's but a stepping stone. And if that's encouraging to that firefighter on the line to take the test because maybe they're just not good with numbers, to become an engineer, there's another outlet in becoming an inspector. And in doing so, you're learning code enforcement, which is a big part of the captain's job. So that's all part of the big picture. As was mentioned up here, communications with the public through the PIO's position that you have so gladly accepted. But there's also a PSO. You know, usually the PIO is the one that's out there in the field in front of the cameras, and the PSO is the one that's in the office fielding calls from various media. We've got to combine that here because, once again, we're too little to be big and we're too big to be little. But overall, we've also noticed an uptick in communications with our local newspapers. You know, that's one of our main venues out to the public, and we're establishing new roads there. And so I'm happy to see that. With the with your presentation, you know, it's important that we maintain our promotional lists so that when the time comes when we have a vacancy, we can immediately go to that list that is current and fill that position without having to go through the process of establishing a new test. Stock versus no stock. You mentioned that, where other districts, they just go to the warehouse and pick. Well, that's well and good, but that takes money to have that reserve to do that. Versus no money invested, yet you just order what you need from outside, but we have a delay. So we have to weigh and decide that. But what gathers my attention most on this presentation is the fact that it's strategic plan based on that. And you can see that through the strategic goal points that you bring up. What I think would be beneficial down the road as we perfect this is to give us an indicator of where we're at within that strategic plan, strategy, or goal. Whether it's a numerical value 1 through 10 on Chief Mazulis's priority number 1, goal number 4, strategy 4.1. Hey, we're at a 9 on that out of 10. We're almost there. Or goal number 5, that's in a yellow zone from red to yellow to green. We're almost there. Some sort of indicator that would say, hey, good work, we're almost there with that. Or, hey, we didn't touch this one. I look forward to seeing it when we do. Again, just ideas. It's a great presentation. I like the overall, I think the overall engagement that we all had together in discussing all these points. So to that, I say thank you for all the hard work all the way across the board. Unless there's any other points, Chief, back at you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. Thank you, executives, for those outstanding reports. And, again, just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of hard work being done out there, and it's really good. So, we had quite a bit of public correspondence and appreciation. And obviously, we won't stop and read all of them, but I want to encourage the board, others that have access to this, to read them. One I do want to highlight was the upper left corner on the first slide there, Mr. and Mrs. Douglas Lundgren. I know, and I know Chief Mazulis could expound a little more as our EMS chief, but we've had a number of incidents the last few months where our firefighters have literally saved lives. And I think last board meeting, I believe I shared the pediatric of the 2-year-old with scorpion bite. If everyone remembers. Well, I guess this is going to be a regular thing, how we'll just report out on this, how we saved another life. And this was really unusual. A young teenager jumped in the water. How he hit the water, that blunt, impact to his chest area caused him to go in full arrest. So when we talk about the chain of events and the EMS incident, especially when we talk about cardiac arrest, there's a lot of factors that really assisted, but one was those immediate family members initiating CPR, getting him out of the water, initiating CPR. The other is he's a young man. That's helpful. Then the other was our quick response, our firefighters getting on scene, immediately defibrillating this young man, and then initiating aggressive protocols, and literally saved his life. He's an athletic young man that, you'll see in the correspondence how he won some state medals there recently. So, you know, given I think 17-year-old shot at life that he probably wouldn't have had without a response, that's a big deal. So, you know, not only you can see the family correspondence, how neat that was. So, what's that highlight? Well, I think sometimes if you look at a minute for outcomes, this was an incredible outcome. And that whole chain of events, without training our community to use CPR in an appropriate way, that's important. We make those efforts. As Chief Booth highlighted, we went to a local church, just did some CPR training. In addition, having the correct apparatus and equipment, having trained firefighters that know what they're doing, actually initiate protocols very incredibly aggressively as second nature. That's why we get these outcomes. So, you know, the board should be proud of this crew of these firefighters here, and this staff, because we're getting outcomes, good outcomes. And again, there's a lot we can say it was just chance. I don't believe that. I believe it was well-trained firefighters that had the right apparatus and equipment, had the confidence to go out and do their job in the spur of a moment, in a matter of minutes. That's why we're getting these outcomes. That's why we get this kind of input from the community. So, I did want to camp a moment on that one because that's a big deal. So, encourage the board again to look at the correspondence. I enjoy that. Was correspondence from one of our board members in there too, you know. So thank you for that. And I think the finish off the chief's report, Camp Courage is an awesome picture. We have quite a bit of staff that went up and assisted with that, and that's been, I don't know, how many years have they been doing that, Ed?
Well, since COVID, 20 years, but since 2000.
Very impressive what they do up there, and it's just a neat experience for our firefighters to participate in that. Our public outreach, again, we've highlighted that quite a bit here with social media and with the committee fire and how effective that is. You can see that. You can see some of the interest we had. The unusual cable car call. I think Chief Baker's back there scratching his head. You know, it's one of those, you get a problem every once in a while with a firefighter, and you go, well, no one's done this, no one's seen that, but let's engage and make decisions. And again, a good outcome, smart firefighters, good thinking. You know, we safely were able to manage that, but it highlights some of the complexity and challenges in our district. And then, of course, our public outreach, highlighted posts, et cetera, so forth. So that will conclude our chief's report, unless there's any further questions.
I don't think there is, Chief, and once again, I want to thank you and your staff for all the hard work in putting together this presentation this month. Thank you. That brings us to the next item on our agenda. Discussion possible action. There's a board agenda communication regarding the Chief's recommendation on modification of the residency requirement for recommended region. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. So, at the direction of the board, the staff has did some research and background, and we want to present a recommendation to the board regarding, the residency requirement for the position of fire chief. You can see here from the background that we have typically had an in-district residency requirement, after a designated period of hire for fire chief. We also noted, from Mr. Whittington and evaluating state statute that the fire board has latitude to establish what that residency requirement might be. Although we do want to continue to focus on the fact that it should be for a rational reason, and also for a demonstrated business necessity. Again, we want to, make sure there's no disparate impact. When we looked at this and looked at some of the parameters around it, those are some key things to emphasize as staff. So, and we all know the changing climate and economy. It's staff's belief if we widen that requirement, actually for internal, external candidates, gives them a better ability to pick a location to live that's manageable from a financial standpoint. We all know those challenges, and we really don't need to highlight that anymore. Financially, you can see, and I know everyone's reviewed this, but there are some potential savings for the district in terms of housing-related contractual obligations, or a in-district housing stipend, moving expenses, cost of living-related salary requests, et cetera. So there's a financial component. We looked at some of the pros and cons. I think that, you know, a broader residency requirement does open the chief position, whether it's an internal, external candidate. And I think, anytime we fill a position, you know, as admin works on recruitment and consistency, broader than that, the more opportunity to get the most highly qualified candidate. So I think this assists and supports in that. Also, again, we want a fair requirement that opens it up to the appropriate candidate pool. Again, as highlighted in the background, it gives that candidate an opportunity to find the appropriate housing. So, cons, you know, there could be a perception fire chief isn't accessible. Although when we look at this recommendation, I think you'll see that, the fire chief will continue to remain accessible. Nothing to note, just for consistency across the board, there aren't any residency requirements for any other position in the Sedona Fire District, from assistant chief down. So, pushing maybe a broader residency requirement would maybe be more consistent for all employees, including the fire chief. So, my recommendation, after looking at this and doing research and getting input from staff, would be that we do modify the in-district residency requirement for fire chief, to within a 50-mile radius. And, what I recommended here was, keep it to that 50-mile radius and measure, from Fire Station 1 here, to Google to that neighboring city hall or town center when you do a Google search. So, we listed the two potential motions there, but, I will stop that report and just open it up for questions from the board if I've missed anything or they have any questions.
I totally support this. Chamber CEO lives in Clarkdale and works just fine. And because we had that wider view of all of the Verde Valley when we were searching a year ago, it really made a big difference in picking housing. So I'm in full support of the whole idea of making this a broad environment and with people's ability to communicate very quickly with a Tracy pager that we have in our hand. This is a different world than it was 10 years ago.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have one concern, excuse me. And the concern is about the measurement to a neighboring city center. And if, like, I live in unincorporated Yavapai County, that means that if it's measurement to the city center, and the city center means that all of, let's say, Prescott is included, but I live in unincorporated Yavapai County, that means I have a 50-mile hard radius. That doesn't seem quite equitable. So I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chair, it's a small modification to this that's just 50 miles. And I think 50 miles is very generous, but that way it's equitable to all, whether they live in a highly urbanized area of the counties or they live out in the boonies.
Okay, do we have any other input on that?
Yeah, this is Gene here.
Yeah, Gene, go ahead.
I did a little research before coming online earlier this morning. And did you know that currently there's only one municipality, granted, it's not a district, in all of Arizona that has a true residency requirement for its public safety officials? Other cities have more relaxed restrictions and so forth, which require that they live within 100 miles. Now, I'm not suggesting that. 100 miles of the city. I am suggesting that we have here buried in Sedona, a gold mine. And that gold mine is pure gold nuggets, so on. Within our admin and operational staff and EMS and the people in the field. That gold mine we had there, it's right there for us. And I strongly support the idea to bring those who are part of that gold mine so that we can do some mining. And so I want to go on a little bit more, if you don't mind. I've been sick since July 7th. I'm still sick. And there's part of that gold mine are the people in the field. I'm just a regular guy. I'm the average guy. And but I was sick. And so I called 911. And the guys from Station 3 came to my rescue. And these weren't the guys from Mother, Drugs, and Speed, that old 1976 movie. These were, for me, these are friends. And but you know, they extend their friendship to everybody who calls. And there's so many other people out there who are ill and alone, and all they need to do is call. And they have a gold mine sitting right there in front of them. I have with a wealth of people who are trained just beyond measure. I spent years like our chairman. I spent years doing this stuff. Never thought I'd be in the back of an ambulance, but there I was. And they took me to the closest appropriate facility to meet my needs at the time. God bless them. It's just a. And oh, by the way, folks, I'm going to be serving another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene, and congratulations on that. Also, get better soon because we need you back here. All righty. Thank you for your input on the matter at hand. What I'd like to add here onto this is that, as the motion suggested is worded, it mentions the city center as they measured through Google Maps. What does that mean? Does that mean that if you're a block outside of the city center, you aren't going to be considered? Or if you live on the far part of that particular city that encompasses this 50-mile radius, you would be considered. Yet if I live in an unincorporated area, I'm held fast to that hard line, and I don't have the advantage of perhaps somebody who lives in a city. So I would suggest, as I think it was also mentioned up here by Helen, that the motion be structured such that it is a hard line equal to everybody, no matter where you live, and it could be applied consistently, irregardless of time of day, day of year, weather type, or how much time it takes you to get in. So if you guys agree with that, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Okay. So I go ahead and move to approve the modification of the residency requirement for the position of fire chief to be within 50 miles as measured by Google Maps from Fire Station 1. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, any opposed? Modification for residency has been approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the review of the fire chief's job description and the announcement. Chief?
So in reviewing the job description and job announcement, staff's looked at it, it's current as of 3 years ago. And there would not be a recommendation to modify much, with the exception, of course, on the job announcement, where we just talked, we'd have to modify the residency requirement and also update pay scales, and then again, other information like a testing process dates. So that kind of general information would have to be updated, but the content is accurate, it's thorough, and I think inclusive of what a job description and job announcement should incorporate.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on that or input for the chief? Okay, so what that brings us to, Chief, is that as they are presented here, with the exception of those modifications, as you described, we'll go ahead and make the motion to approve these. So with that said, I move to approve the fire chief's job description and the fire chief's job announcement with the amendments as described, as discussed, for the vacancy of fire chief. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries that the job description and job announcement be accepted as described with the modifications. Okay. Discussion possible action is the next item for determining internal candidate interest for board consideration. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. So, staff looked at this, and, as requested by the board, we did, poll to solicit any internal interest. Of course, that's not applying, but we have at least 2 solid qualified candidates that have solicited their interest in the position of fire chief. So I think this is a really good moment for Sedona Fire District. And why I think that is, you just heard reports by executive staff. You hear how our firefighters are performing out in the field. There's a lot of really good, hard work going on here, and think about the possibility that at least 2 internal homegrown candidates are expressing interest. What that is for an organization our size is the sign of health. And it's a sign of people that want to be here and work here. And it's a sign of people that want to better the community and better the district. So I'm personally excited, but, as staff looked at this, What we would recommend is looking at an internal process, because we do believe we have valid internal candidates. I think looking at and hiring an internal candidate projects stability. It's very effective and efficient for continuity of operations, which we've talked a lot about the last couple of years as we've overcome some of our COVID challenges. Also, I think it keeps the district moving forward in a positive trajectory because strategies, issues, deficiencies are known, and there won't be a baton drop on implementing solutions for those issues and seeing those issues or solutions for those issues to completion, you know, and so that we come away with some positive outcomes. So, also as part of discussion, would submit that internally, we do have the staff to manage a process that would be complete, thorough, that would be robust, that will be per current human resource practices. And I think that's a plus also. We've done a lot of recruitment process and promotional process in the last few years, and as Director Robinson spoke, as we refine that, this is another opportunity to show our prowess in that area, and I think we can do that quite effectively. Also, we do have the support of the region. Somehow everyone heard that the fire chief here is retiring. I don't know how. I thought I kept it pretty secret. But, you know, we have area fire chiefs that are well in support of us in terms of initiating a process. We have a strong labor contingent that will be able to participate. We have strong leadership and managers and a strong board. All these groups would participate in this robust process that we have pretty well defined in terms of what the process would look like and what the categories are that what the candidates will be evaluated as we utilized the outside vendor for the chief process 3 years ago. So we model it similar to that. So that's kind of the background and what staff would recommend. The other component I want to introduce before questions is not only do I believe we can initiate an internal process that's an appropriate process and robust and evaluates the candidates appropriately, the board can make a good decision. When we looked at a timeline, we can do this and turn this around with direction from the board. I think without missing any component, making sure it's a thorough process, making sure it's per HR hiring practices, I think we can turn this around with a lot of hard staff work, and I have staff that is willing to put that work in. But we can turn this around, initiate it quickly, and get it to the board possibly where the board could be, have the decision in front of them next board meeting, where they can make a decision, or you can make a decision. Actually, in terms of continuity of operations, the promotion can be made, and as I'm waving by, the next chief's waving hello. So that potential is there, and it will be a lot of hard work as a backup to that, even if we initiated the process and there was a couple of delays with getting a certain panel member or a chief out of town or whatever. I think we can still accomplish it at least where the September board meeting, board would have all that process and information to make their decision. And again, well, what will we do in the interim? Because I'm off the clock on September 3rd is what we do is our normal practice. We have a chain of command, we have someone who's next up in rank. When I go out of town, I say, here's who's covering. So that's a easy, normal process. So what I want to just emphasize though is I believe we can press the timeline and still keep an appropriate process, but also there's still flexibility. There's always going to be flexibility. Now, the only last thing I think I wanna input before we take questions is, if the board's decision is to go with an external candidate, then that is a different process, and it would be a long process. So there's other considerations like acting, covering, also whether to hire an outside vendor or not to manage that. Which if you do a national search, that would be appropriate, because it's a lot of staff work to manage that, so, as we did before. But again, it's up to the board's direction. I wanna just iterate what staff and myself would recommend, again, on that internal process. And the external process is always an option, but it'll be a board direction. So, I'll close those comments, and then if there's any questions on anything I said, or the board would give direction.
Thank you, Chief. Comments? Al?
I'm in support of the process of soliciting from internal candidates. I have personal connection to this process, and, it made sense. Public liked it.
Ready? Gene, if you're there still, any comment?
I am, and I ditto on what Al said.
Okay, thank you, Gene. Janet?
I agree with Al also. I appreciate that we extended the, radius, to accommodate to hire from within, and I think, that is really a very good choice.
Okay. And Helen?
I absolutely support the recommendation for hiring from within, and we always, if for any reason, which I don't believe is gonna happen, but if for any reason, we always have the other process
Sure.
as a fallback. But I believe we've got great internal candidates, and we should move on that path.
I feel the same way. I think, we're in a great position. Our internal candidates, are more than qualified for that position. So it seems to me that the consensus of the board is to continue moving forward with the internal process as you've probably laid out all the way through. A timeline is what we don't have control over is the availability of those people outside of our organization. And that's what may be governing some of these time delays, a time delay that will cause us to move into an interim person for but a short time. And utilizing our normal in-house procedures by going through the next in command as interim totally makes sense, as we go through this process for internal. So, if there's a motion to be made, it is to move to, continue the process internally, with the candidates that we have, the testing process, and I would, that you're going to develop or implement, for the position of fire chief. With that, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? I lost place. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries to move through the internal process.
Yes, sir, and if, just as a follow-up, can I get a point of clarification?
Yes.
So we will initiate an internal process, and just so you know, that aggressive timeline is we'll launch the announcement tomorrow, and it flies for 14 days. Now, my intent is to be that aggressive so we can get through this process. So, just being clear, that's what the board is directing me to do. I understand the internal process, but there is flexibility, but we will jump and aggressively go at it, but that's the intent.
That is correct.
Excellent, thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay, the last item on the agenda is discussion board members' fire district-related activities since the last board meeting, and I will start with Helen.
Okay.
Always with Helen.
All right, well, as, Secretary Baker knows, I was at the Stop the Bleed. Thank you very much for that training, it was great, and for the information that followed up, I appreciate it. And, other than that, my usual of reviewing bills and signing checks and, handling inquiries about the fire and for my neighbors and things related to that. And like Jean, sweating out whether we were going to have to go through an election. And it looks like, unless somebody runs out and does a write-in, that we're safe, which is a great relief.
Congratulations, all right. Okay, Janet?
I also enjoyed Stop the Bleed. I have been also fielding questions from my neighbors once the wind started gusting up and pillars of orange clouds moved around our neighborhood. That sort of spooked a lot of people. And as far as my term with checks, I haven't been doing that at all lately because I've been having problems. So Dave has been handling mine, and hopefully, we're real close to getting it resolved.
Good, that's good to hear, thank you. Jean, do you have anything for this past month's activities?
Well, just to reiterate, what have you, and extend my appreciation to Chief Booth. She and her staff stepped forward and what have you. They were just absolutely great. They answered, you know, some people might think they're silly questions, but not Chief Booth. She and her staff were just right there. And the more questions he asked, the more answers she had. And I was very impressed. I'm very impressed with this woman. She's done us well. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Jean, thank you. Al?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Jean for field testing ambulance services. That's really way beyond the call of duty of a board member. But it's interesting. Also, Scott Springett is not able to make it to tonight's meeting, but he and I did deliver signatures to the county last Monday, and as Helen said, he is looking forward to joining the board come November, and he's actually excited. It's really nice to hear. And then the whole experience of the past few days, I don't know if you all know this, but I control a web camera up on top of the airport that, and I have the ability to make it go and look at anything at once that it's within its field of view. And so I was able to fix it on the mountain and let it sit there and then post that people could see the fire live. And I don't know if it was I think it was a positive, and it got around to some other agencies that it did exist. And it turns out that on the 1st of August, we're replacing that with a very high-tech, high-res camera that's a 360-degree. And I am going to be giving the controls of the camera to some other people. The camera is owned by the Chamber of Commerce as a service to the community, and and we have told the city that this does exist, and if it has any value, to be able to have the camera be a set of eyes for when emergencies like this exist. I was really honored that I was able to provide that value, and maybe in the future it could have even greater value.
Thank you, Al. All right. Lastly, as with the other two board members, I was able to attend the Stop the Bleed, which was great training, great refresher for me. It felt like I was back out on the line, but I wasn't, which is a good thing. I had the opportunity to attend the AFTA conference as part of a mock governing board for a fire district, and went through real life scenarios. So Bill hosted that training, and I had a lot of fun. A lot of anxiety. You got it. And as did Chief Booth, helped us also on there. So it was a lot of fun. A little anxiety building up to it, but we got it. And then lastly, I had an opportunity to sit in a board meeting with the airport to discuss some of their up and coming construction projects along with Chief Booth, and we made some pretty good headway. And you know, issues keep coming along and we keep attacking them. So, that was my involvement for the month for the fire district. So with that said, unless there is anything else by
I have
anybody.
one small thing.
Yeah.
I owe an apology to Battalion Chief Baker for getting your title wrong, and I am so sorry.
Okay, so with that said, all items have been covered on the agenda. This meeting is now adjourned. Okay. Thank you, Gene.
You betcha. Glad to